Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating plunge into the complex world of one of the biggest tech giants out there, Google. We'll be unpacking its current state, its incredible trajectory, and also some surprising, almost contradictory challenges it's facing, especially now, in the era of artificial intelligence. Our mission for this deep dive is basically to pull out the most crucial bits of knowledge, the really surprising insights from a recent discussion that gives a real insider's view on Google. And this conversation, it features Mookie Tannenbaum, and he describes Google at what he calls the crossroads of AI. It offers some unique financial angles and, honestly, a compelling look at where technology, and maybe even medicine, is heading, and fast.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here, I think, is how Google, despite its almost unbelievable success, right? It's grappling with these huge external pressures. We're talking regulators mostly. And at the same time, it's driving this massive internal revolution with its AI research. So we're going to explore how its very dominance has kind of paradoxically become its Achilles heel. It's being forced to navigate this landscape where its past successes are now, its biggest legal headaches, even while its DeepMind division is charting this frankly, almost unimaginable future.
Okay, yeah, let's definitely unpack that. Our focus today is really squarely on Tannenbaum's insights. He lays out this compelling and often, let's say, provocative narrative about Google's journey. So let's start by grounding ourselves in Google's current financial position, because that right there immediately shows this paradox he mentioned.
Unprecedented success meets unforeseen hurdles.
When we talk about Google, it's hard not to just be struck by its sheer, almost unbelievable growth. Especially, when you look at the stock, Tannenbaum highlights this. Around the start of the pandemic, 2020, Google's stock was averaging, around $50 a share?
Something like that, yeah.
And today, it's valued at $178.70. That's not just steady growth. It's an explosion. It's nearly 3.5 times the value in just a few years. For a company of Google's size, its massive market cap, that kind of surge, even through pandemics, global conflicts. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Absolutely extraordinary.
So, for a company that's seen this explosive growth, navigated a world that's been anything but stable, what does this phenomenal trajectory really signify?
Well, that growth, it's undeniably a testament to Google's fundamental strength, right?
Yeah.
Its resilience, its pervasive influence across just so many parts of our digital lives. Search, cloud, you name it. It really indicates a core business that just keeps expanding and adapting. But, and this is where Tannenbaum points out that critical nuance, the paradox, despite this really impressive surge, Google is still apparently far from its all-time high compared to many other tech giants.
Right, that's the puzzling part.
Exactly. So it immediately raises that big question. Why? Why would a company showing such robust market-leading growth, even with all the global turmoil, still be lagging behind its peers and hitting its peak valuation? It's a real puzzle for investors, for analysts, for us. The Achilles heel, antitrust lawsuits. And Tannenbaum, he really pinpoints the main drag on Google's value. The reason for this perplexing undervaluation is the ongoing antitrust lawsuits. Plain and simple. The core of these suits, as he lays it out, is that Google is, just too successful.
Too successful. That sounds like a good problem to have, usually.
Usually, maybe. But here, they control such a dominant slice of the market, particularly in search and advertising, that governments, regulators all over the world, they're stepping in. They see this dominance not just as, the result of great innovation, but as a kind of monopolistic power that stifles competition, maybe even harms consumers in the long run. It's that classic case, right? Success invites intense scrutiny. Market leadership becomes a huge legal and financial liability in the eyes of the regulators. It's not about Google failing. It's about them succeeding so well they've become kind of too big for comfort.
And this legal pressure, it's not just a minor thing, is it? It fundamentally hits how investors see Google. Which brings us to Tannenbaum's really fascinating financial points.
Yeah.
He mentions Google's price-to-earnings ratio, the PE ratio. It's currently less than 20. Now, for anyone maybe less familiar, that PE ratio, it basically tells you how many years of earnings it would take to sort of recoup your investment in the stock.
Right. A low PE often signals an undervalued stock.
Or potentially higher risk, or maybe the market sees slower growth ahead. For Google, though, this innovative tech giant, seemingly endless growth potential, such a low PE compared to its peers suggests the market is clearly discounting its value somehow. And Tannenbaum contrasts Google's market cap. It's half of NVIDIA's, even though he calls Google an outstanding company in many ways.
Yeah.
So you've got this incredibly profitable, innovative behemoth, yet its valuation just doesn't seem to reflect that strength compared to others, mostly because of these persistent regulatory clouds hanging over it.
And that valuation gap, it raises a really important question for market watchers and for you listening. Does that low PE, that lower valuation, does it really mean the company is too successful in a bad way? Or is it more a sign of these external pressures unfairly pushing down its true value? Because Tenenbaum emphasizes, despite these legal fights, Google keeps advancing everywhere. Advertising dominance is still huge, incredibly lucrative, and they're solidly among the top 3, maybe 4 leading AI companies globally. So the innovation engine hasn't stalled at all. It's running full steam ahead.
So the market's just pricing in the risk.
It seems like it. The market and how it values Google appears to be heavily factoring in significant regulatory risk. It's basically saying, okay, we need a faster payback on our Google investment than we do for, say, NVIDIA because of all this legal uncertainty.
Okay, and when Tenenbaum gets into the specifics of these lawsuits, the main one, the most immediate threat, seems to revolve around the Chrome browser, which, let's face it, most of us probably use every single day.
Oh, absolutely. Huge market share.
Yeah, hovering around 65% globally. And the accusation from regulators is that Chrome creates this unfair advantage for Google. Specifically, they claim that Chrome's default automatic Google searches, plus its really deeply integrated advertising structure, where ads are just woven into the browsing, almost part of the content, effectively creates an unassailable monopoly.
Making it hard for others to compete?
Exactly. Regulators argue it stifles competition, makes it incredibly difficult for rival search engines or browsers to even get a foothold. And this has led to serious demands for Chrome to be separated from the wider Google empire.
Wow, separation, that's huge.
Potentially forcing Chrome to operate independently. That's a massive threat because Chrome isn't just a browser, right? It's the main doorway for so many people into Google's whole universe of services, Gmail, YouTube, Maps.
It's the gateway. And this is exactly where Tenenbaum offers a really thought-provoking take on what a monopoly even means in this digital age. He argues that ultimately a monopoly is a decision of the consumer. That's his phrase.
A decision of the consumer. How so?
His point is, look, if consumers actively, repeatedly choose to use Google Search or Chrome because they think it's better, more convenient, more reliable, just superior to the alternatives, then is that really an anti-competitive monopoly that needs government intervention? Or is it just a reflection of genuine market preference? He questions if these anti-monopoly laws, as they're being applied now, actually foster real competition, or if, ironically, the consumer ends up paying a price.
Paying a price how?
Maybe through stifled innovation because companies are scared to integrate features, or less efficient services because things that naturally work together are forced apart, or even just a fragmented, annoying user experience. Tenenbaum makes another critical point here, drawing this stark historical parallel. He argues governments are stuck on old solutions, like breaking up companies. He specifically mentions the AT&T breakup back in the 70s and 80s.
Ah, yes, the baby bells.
Exactly. AT&T was this telecom giant, got broken into regional companies to boost competition. And while maybe that worked then, Tenenbaum suggests that whole approach is fundamentally outdated, misdirected, especially in today's fast-moving digital markets. He believes that instead of tackling the much bigger, looming problem job displacement due to AI, which he sees as way more pressing, potentially devastating consequences, regulators are busy with what he thinks is a secondary issue.
So focusing on monopoly laws instead of the AI impact.
Precisely. And to highlight this disconnect, he cites a recent Spanish parliamentary session. He says they spent 5 hours discussing economic and military issues, traditional concerns, right, but the word AI, not mentioned, not once.
Wow.
For Tenenbaum, that just shows this a massive gap between the incredible speed of technological change and the, frankly, tragically slow speed of government understanding and response. The innovation race. Google's perpetual motion machine.
Tenenbaum paints this really vivid picture of Google, calling it a company full of bubbles, constantly innovating, experimenting, pushing out new things like a perpetual motion machine, new ideas, new products just constantly bubbling up. If one doesn't work, boom, another one takes its place. And he contrasts this sharply with Apple.
Ah, the Apple comparison. What does he say there?
He suggests Apple has stopped innovating. And in a really provocative phrase, he says they've sold its soul to the devil of the present. Meaning for Tenenbaum, Apple's just comfortable resting on its laurels, optimizing what it has, instead of boldly charting new, uncertain territory with truly disruptive tech.
That is a striking comparison. It really speaks to different philosophies of innovation, doesn't it? And he points to specific things happening at Apple that, for him, signal this perceived stagnation, or maybe just a shift in focus. He mentions the departure of Apple's AI chief, who went over to Meta, and the retirement of Apple's COO, who kind of surprisingly is 10 years younger than Tim Cook.
10 years younger, really?
Yeah. Tenenbaum describes this as Apple starting to bleed talent and vision, and he predicts this initial bleeding could potentially become a hemorrhage if Apple doesn't show a clear future vision, especially compared to Google's relentless drive for the next big thing. For him, Apple's recent moves suggest a company may be struggling to keep pace, prioritizing refinement over revolution.
Okay, selling its soul is definitely provocative. But couldn't you argue that Apple's whole strategy of refinement, that obsessive focus on user experience, design, the ecosystem, isn't that its own form of innovation? Maybe less about flashy new tech, but more about perfecting things, making them work seamlessly together. Does Tenenbaum just dismiss that, or is he highlighting a difference in the type of innovation?
Yeah, that's a fair point. He's not necessarily dismissing Apple's massive success, I think. He's framing it in contrast to what he sees as Google's more dynamic, more future-looking approach. He'd likely acknowledge Apple excels at polishing and integrating, creating that super user-friendly experience. But from his viewpoint, that strategy, while incredibly profitable, means they aren't leading the charge into the truly disruptive, maybe messy, uncertain areas that Google's constantly exploring, like really cutting-edge AI or foundational science. For him, Google's bubbles represent a higher risk, maybe, but also a higher reward innovation model. Apple's approach, while successful, is less about creating the next big thing and more about perfecting the current big thing.
Makes sense. Despite these different philosophies, though, Tenenbaum does remind us both companies are still absolutely dominant in mobile OS, right? Apple's iOS on iPhones, Google's Android on pretty much everything else.
Oh, absolutely. That's a foundational strength for both, regardless of where else they diverge. Controlling those platforms gives them enormous leverage and reach. Google's history of free and acquired innovation.
And thinking about Google's legacy, Tenenbaum points out how they really pioneered so many free internet services. They basically reshaped our expectations of what the web should offer us. He points to Google Maps totally transformed navigation, didn't it?
Yeah.
Made paper maps almost obsolete, turn-by-turn directions in our pockets, all free.
I barely remember using paper maps.
Right. And of course, the search engine itself. Started simple, became the world's main info gateway, again, free. He even mentions Waze, the navigation app. Google bought it, and then, crucially, kept it free.
Which is interesting because it's so useful.
Exactly. He jokes that Waze, used by almost everyone daily, logically should cost money, like old maps did, or fancy GPS devices. But Google chose to make it free. It shows that strategy of grabbing user attention and data through utility, not direct payment. That model's been key to their success.
Absolutely. It highlights that whole strategy. Provide massive value, often at no direct cost, create an ecosystem that billions find indispensable. Then the business model monetizes that huge user base and all the data generated through very targeted advertising. Tenenbaum also brings up Yahoo's colossal missed opportunity, doesn't he? Not buying Google early on. A decision that, looking back, seems almost unbelievable.
Yeah, what was the price then? $1 million or something crazy low?
Something like that, yeah. And he notes Yahoo's current survival really rests mainly on Yahoo Finance, which he actually praises, says it's probably the best site for managing personal portfolios and its surprisingly strong ongoing presence in Japan.
Japan? Really?
Yeah, apparently still very big there. But it contrasts so sharply with Google's truly global reach and just overwhelming dominance everywhere else in search and digital ads. Interestingly, though, Tenenbaum points out, neither Google nor Yahoo ever really managed to crack the huge, highly regulated Chinese market. That remains its own unique, walled-off digital world. Shows even these giants have their limits. The AI pivot. From Bard to Gemini.
Tenenbaum recounts that pivotal moment, the one that sent shockwaves through tech, when OpenAI's ChatGPT just burst onto the scene, especially with Microsoft heavily backing Bing search with its Copilot AI assistant.
Right, suddenly AI was everywhere.
And Google, he says, was initially caught off guard. He describes their rushed response, the immediate launch of Bard, pretty bluntly as junk.
Ouch! Junk!
Yeah, candid take. It suggested, it was hurried, underdeveloped, didn't meet the high bar Google usually sets, especially in this super fast-moving AI race.
But Tenenbaum acknowledges Google improved rapidly, showed off its deep engineering bench, its huge resources. They iterated fast and launched Gemini, and he now firmly puts Gemini as one of the big three foundational AI models globally. right back in the top tier alongside OpenAI and Anthropic. They caught up fast.
So from junk to top 3 very quickly.
Exactly. And he speculates about Gemini's future, suggests it could integrate advertising based on really specific, almost predictive user queries, truly knowing what to sell you based on your interests, your context right now.
Like, give me an example.
Well, Tenenbaum gives this intriguing scenario. Say you're asking Gemini about whipped cream. Maybe you want to buy it, or find the best brand, or use it in a recipe, or just check nutrition info. Gemini, he thinks, could intelligently suggest specific brands, maybe link-related recipes, even point you to local stores that have it in stock. It'd be a powerful evolution of their ad model, using AI's nuanced understanding of intent, way beyond just simple keywords.
That's potentially very useful, but also a bit creepy, maybe.
Potentially both. But definitely a glimpse into how AI could transform advertising.
Redefining medicine and materials.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really mind-bending. We shift from search and ads into completely new territory. Tenenbaum talks about DeepMind, Google's internal AI powerhouse, the division that first got famous years back for beating Garry Kasparov at chess, right? Showing AI could handle complex strategy.
Deep Blue, yeah. Well, DeepMind is Google's own, but yes, that lineage of AI tackling grand challenges.
Right. But its current applications, according to Tenenbaum, are truly revolutionary, far beyond games, into areas that could fundamentally reshape entire industries we thought were, well, pretty fixed.
Tenenbaum makes some pretty audacious claims here. He states DeepMind is reportedly on the verge of creating all necessary medicine for any disease. That's a huge statement.
All necessary medicine.
Wow. It sounds bold, but it's grounded in the incredible progress AI is making in understanding biology at the molecular level. He reveals DeepMind apparently already has a cancer cure entering testing, which, if it pans out, would be absolutely monumental. And to illustrate DeepMind's almost like uncanny diagnostic ability, Tenenbaum gives this powerful, almost chilling example.
Okay, what is it?
DeepMind was shown x-rays of people a full year before they were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Without being told what disease to look for, just given the images, DeepMind identified early signs of pancreatic cancer in an astounding 72% of those cases.
72%, a year early.
Yes. Something no human doctor, even experts, saw at that crucial early stage. That's a profound shift, right? From reactive treatment to proactive predictive health, seeing diseases before they even fully manifest.
That's incredible. And it's not just medicine, is it? He mentioned materials, too.
Exactly. Tenenbaum highlights that DeepMind is also being used to find entirely new materials from scratch. This isn't just tweaking existing chemicals, it's AI designing novel structures with properties human scientists might never have imagined.
Like what kind of properties?
Lighter, stronger, more conductive, more durable. Tailor-made for specific needs. This could revolutionize manufacturing, engineering, energy storage, countless fields. Imagine materials designed perfectly for a task by an AI. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, Tenenbaum explains the huge implications for the pharmaceutical industry. That traditional drug development process takes 5, 10, sometimes 15 years from discovery to market.
Or notoriously long and expensive.
He says AI could drastically cut that down, maybe do as little as 2 years. AI can speed up every step, finding drug candidates, predicting how well they'll work, even simulating toxicity. He even speculates that safety tests, a huge bottleneck, could eventually be done by AI, making development faster and potentially safer drugs. This will profoundly impact big pharma companies like Eli Lilly, Novartis, and Tenenbaum reports Google already has contracts with companies like these. So this isn't just theory, it's happening now. These breakthroughs are being integrated into industry partnerships.
What really stands out to me here and what Tenenbaum makes so clear is how this just blurs the lines between whole industries. You have Google, known for search and ads, suddenly becoming a powerhouse in drug discovery, material science, and it makes it so hard to categorize these companies anymore, doesn't it? Are they tech? Industrial, medical, they're becoming these hybrid entities operating at the intersection of fields that used to be totally separate. It redefines what a tech company even means.
Absolutely. And this raises a really important and potentially very controversial question, especially for investors, for policymakers. Tenenbaum really emphasizes this. What about intellectual property? IP.
Right. If an AI finds a cure, who owns it?
Exactly. He highlights this critical issue being debated right now, and in some cases, decisions are already being made. There's this growing feeling, and some legal interpretations are leaning this way, that anything created solely by AI isn't covered by traditional IP patents, copyright.
Wait, really? So AI inventions might be free for all?
Potentially, yes. It has enormous implications. If DeepMind finds a cure for a disease or develops that revolutionary new material, it could be extremely difficult, maybe impossible, to patent it or sell it exclusively. Why? Because, Tenenbaum suggests, other AIs could independently find similar solutions very quickly once the first one is out there. The underlying data, the principles, would be accessible.
So what does that mean for medicine then?
The implication, Tenenbaum believes, is that drugs could become significantly cheaper. They might have fewer side effects because AI can optimize them better. And they could be developed in weeks instead of years. Even if big AI companies like Google dominate the discovery, the lack of IP protection could force a totally different business model. Maybe making life-saving innovations much more widely accessible, but also deeply challenging the traditional profit motives of the pharma industry. It's a huge shift. Challenges to the core. Google's shifting landscape.
Okay, so while DeepMind is pushing into these incredible new frontiers, Tenenbaum also points to a major, maybe even existential threat to Google's central business search.
Right, the cash cow.
For decades, Google's been the undisputed gateway to information online. But now people are increasingly bypassing Google search directly. They're using AI for queries they used to type into the search bar, asking things like, where should I eat tonight? Or how do I fix this leaky faucet? Directly to an AI instead of scrolling through Google results. This is a fundamental shift in user behavior, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it strikes right at the core of Google's ad-driven revenue model. If fewer people use Google for basic info searches, their ability to serve those targeted ads diminishes severely. It hits their primary moneymaker. And he notes how fast this is changing. He mentioned that just days before their conversation, new AI-powered browsers and conversational AI interfaces popped up, directly competing with Chrome and Google's core search market.
So it's not just a new search engine, it's a whole new way of getting information.
Exactly. It's about a new way to access and process information that doesn't rely on Google's traditional index and rank system. These new AI interfaces give direct answers, summaries, engaging conversation, often eliminating the need to click through pages of blue links. This forces Google into a really tough defensive position. They have to innovate now, not just to lead, but just to protect their foundational business from being chipped away by these new intelligent AI interfaces, the AI pricing dilemma.
Tenenbaum also highlights the different business models popping up in AI, especially around pricing for advanced access. Using Advanced Gemini, for example, might cost you, $20 a month?
About that, yeah.
Elon Musk's Grok 4 from his company XAI Tenenbaum says he's been testing at ranges from $30 a month for basic up to $300 a month for premium features. Quite a range.
Yeah, tiered pricing.
And OpenAI, with ChatGPT, they charge around $200 a month for their top-tier models. These are pretty significant subscription fees, right? Setting a precedent for high-value, high-cost AI access.
They are. But Tenenbaum believes Google will not win in this high-priced AI race.
Really?
Maybe even that they can't win there. He sees their strength lying elsewhere, in their legacy, providing immense value to a massive audience, often for free. Remember, Maps, Search, Gmail. So he predicts Google will actually broaden its free model for AI. Why? To secure mass adoption, just like they did before. His thinking is clear. If Google tries to compete head-to-head at $200 a month, they risk losing that huge user base that drives their ad revenue, which is still their financial foundation. If people start paying for AI somewhere else, they spend less time on Google's platforms. So Google's strategy, he suggests, has to be making AI as accessible as possible, even if it means giving up high subscription fees.
To keep the eyeballs, keep the data flowing for the ad business.
Exactly. To maintain market share, data flow, and ultimately protect that advertising dominance. Otherwise, that core business, relying on everyone using it, is at serious risk of erosion. The cloud wars.
Tenenbaum also reminds us about the cloud. Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Oracle, Amazon's AWS, they're the giants in cloud computing.
The backbone for AI.
Absolutely essential for delivering AI services at scale. These models need immense computing power, specialized chips like GPUs, vast storage. The cloud is a critical battleground for any company wanting to lead in AI.
And what's really fascinating here, Tenenbaum points out this dynamic that shows the complex web of competition and cooperation between these giants. Get this. Despite Microsoft pouring billions into OpenAI, OpenAI actually uses Google's cloud for some of its operations.
Wait, OpenAI uses Google Cloud, not Microsoft Azure, even with Microsoft's investment.
For some operations, yes. And not only that, apparently they are specifically not using NVIDIA chips in those Google Cloud operations, choosing other hardware instead.
That's intricate.
It is. It shows this constant balancing act. Strategic partnerships, competitive pressures.
Hmm.
No single company can completely dominate every single layer of the AI stack. It forces them all to be agile, react quickly to shifting alliances, tech choices. It ensures innovation keeps roaring ahead as they all try to outmaneuver each other, while sometimes, ironically, relying on their rivals' infrastructure beyond commercial applications.
Tenenbaum also touches on a less discussed area of Google's expansion. It's entered the military AI space, which is interesting, right? Because both Google and OpenAI initially made these very public statements about not pursuing military applications.
Yeah, they claimed it was all for the good of humanity, ethical civilian use only.
So what happened?
Well, Tenenbaum notes, pretty dryly, that eventually everyone realized the military business is the largest, most lucrative, and maybe most strategically vital sector globally. And Google, he says, entered it quite a bit earlier than others.
Earlier than others. What kind of things are they likely doing?
Information is scarce, obviously due to the sensitivity. But Tenenbaum suggests Google is likely involved in areas like, say, predictive logistics using AI to optimize military supply chains, drone autonomy enabling drones to operate more independently, advanced intelligence analysis sifting through massive data sets to find patterns, identify threats. It just underscores how commercial interests, ethical stances, often bump up against economic opportunities and national strategic needs, leading to maybe a reevaluation of those earlier public promises.
And didn't he also mention Google developing its own chip?
Ah, yes, Tensor, their own AI accelerator chip. It competes with NVIDIA's market-leading GPUs. It's a big deal for Google's internal AI work, gives them more control. But Tenenbaum indicates it's not quite at NVIDIA's level yet. NVIDIA still dominates the high-performance AI computing market that most of the industry relies on. The bigger picture. Societal shifts and unaddressed problems. Tenenbaum comes back firmly to this point. The current focus on breaking up monopolies, using these, as he calls them, outdated 70s and 80s solutions, it distracts from much larger, far more urgent societal issues that governments really should be tackling head-on. He sees that regulatory energy as largely misplaced, focusing on symptoms rather than the huge transformative forces really at play. The elephant in the room, job displacement by AI. Which brings us to that crucial point. The elephant in the room Tenenbaum believes policymakers are mostly ignoring. What on earth are we going to do with all the people who lose their jobs to AI?
Yeah, that's the big one.
He thinks this is a far, far greater problem than monopolies, which remember he sees largely as a consumer choice anyway. And to hammer home the scale of his coming shift, he states that Google itself already has 30% of its own code written by AI, not human engineers.
30% already. Wow.
And according to him, Google is maybe even misleading its own employees, telling them they're needed for supervision, when the reality is changing so fast. He points out another major AI, Anthropic's Claude model, announced that an incredible 80 to 90% of its own code is now written by AI.
The AI is writing the code for the AI.
Exactly. Tenenbaum marvels at it, almost in disbelief. He declares, the AI writes the code for the AI, and concludes this level of automation fundamentally makes humans superfluous in many, many roles.
That's a profoundly unsettling prediction.
Yeah.
Superfluous.
It is. It's a stark outlook on the future of work, human relevance in an increasingly AI-driven world. It raises urgent questions, doesn't it? About economic inequality, the whole purpose of work, how societies will even restructure to cope with changes this massive.
It really is unsettling. When he talks about AI writing its own code, what does that mean for just the basic human drive to create, to work? Does Tenenbaum offer any thoughts on how society might even begin to grapple with that, beyond just saying this is a huge problem? Or is it just too big to even think about solutions right now?
He mainly focuses on sounding the alarm, identifying the sheer magnitude of the problem, rather than laying out a specific roadmap for solutions. Though he strongly implies that our current government structures are just completely unprepared for this. His underlying message is really one of urgency. Society needs to shift its focus dramatically, away from these old regulatory paradigms, toward proactive planning for a future where traditional jobs might just not exist for huge numbers of people. He suggests this will demand entirely new kinds of social safety nets, completely different educational systems, maybe even a whole redefinition of what it means to contribute to society. Things far beyond what current political debates are even touching on. Google's ubiquitous presence and Google We Trust.
Tenenbaum also paints this vivid picture of how deeply Google is just woven into our daily lives. Almost invisible because it's so fundamental, you know. Android phones in nearly everyone's pocket, the dominant OS globally. Autonomous cars becoming real. Ways guiding our commutes. He mentions his kids use the phrase Google We Trust, like it's this all-knowing guide.
Google we trust. That's telling.
Isn't it? And he notes how Google's even replaced a lot of Microsoft's traditional software suite for many people. Google Docs, Sheets, powerful cloud tools competing directly with Word and Excel. It just further cements how indispensable Google has become, personally and professionally.
And he notes that while he personally might still use traditional AI for some searches, an increasing number of people are doing searches for things like, say, Prime Day deals or best hotels in Rome directly through AI interfaces, not even going to Google search or Amazon first.
Bypassing the giant.
Yeah, this subtle but really significant shift. Users bypassing traditional search engines, even e-commerce platforms, for direct conversational AI-driven answers. It's a direct challenge to Google's long reign in information seeking, maybe even to Amazon's e-commerce power. It just highlights how fast things are changing in how we interact with information, how we make decisions, moving towards this more conversational, integrated AI-first model that could totally reshape the digital economy. Outro.
Wow. This deep dive, really informed by Tenenbaum's insightful, often provocative takes, has definitely been a journey through Google's incredibly complex world. We've seen this company of immense, almost paradoxical success, right? Wrestling with old-world monopoly laws like a tether to its past, while at the same time driving these DeepMind innovations that could literally redefine medicine, material science. It's a company caught between its past achievements and a future it's actively building, facing challenges that are both historical and completely new.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Tenenbaum's analysis certainly gives you a lot to think about, especially if you're looking at the market. From an investor's angle, he says this whole discussion makes him want to look more at biotech or pharmaceutical companies that would benefit from Google's AI breakthroughs, rather than investing directly in Google itself right now.
Interesting. So invest in the companies using the AI tools, not the tool maker.
Kind of. The idea being that the innovations in drug discovery, material science, driven by AI like DeepMind, might create more direct, less legally tangled value in the companies that actually produce and distribute these AI-discovered treatments, especially if that whole IP protection issue for AI discoveries stays murky.
So thinking about the future then, Tenenbaum poses this really provocative idea. Google is so good at acquiring companies, integrating them into its huge ecosystem. It could easily just buy a pharmaceutical lab and do everything itself, couldn't it?
They certainly have the money, the AI, the organizational muscle. They could potentially become a dominant player directly in medicine. But, he concludes, it probably can't. Precisely because of those very monopoly concerns we talked about earlier. The irony, as Tenenbaum highlights it, it's just profound. While existing regulations currently make drug development this incredibly slow 10-year process, bogged down in what Tenenbaum colorfully calls a tupida selva, a dense jungle of rules, committees, bureaucracy, AI could slash that time down to weeks, maybe even days.
Dense jungle.
Yeah. The potential speed is so immense that he speculates about agile, smaller countries, maybe Estonia, maybe Luxembourg, that might rapidly implement new AI-driven legislation for drug approval. Just leapfrogging the slower, traditional regulatory bodies stuck in the old ways. And this raises that huge final question for all of us, really. Will governments adapt? Will they find ways to match the incredible speed of AI innovation, creating frameworks that let these breakthroughs reach people faster? Or will they keep applying old rules to this rapidly evolving future, potentially stifling progress, delaying life-saving discoveries because the paperwork can't keep up?
A really powerful thought to end on. The speed of innovation versus the speed of regulation. That tension is definitely shaping our future. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep questioning.